Welcome to Thrones Rewritten, your home for bold new takes on the Game of Thrones universe. In today's video, we dive into an epic reimagining where Ned Stark demands a trial by combat, facing the Mountain in a battle that shakes King's Landing to its core. From the Red Keep's tense halls to the North's rallying cry, this story explores honor, betrayal, and the fight for truth. Expect thrilling twists, deep character moments, and a Westeros where the Stark's fate hangs in the balance. If you love reimagined tales that honor the spirit of Thrones while forging new paths, hit that subscribe button, like, and ring the bell for more. Let's get into it. The air in the Great Hall of the Red Keep was thick with tension, a palpable weight that pressed against the stone walls and the hearts of all gathered. The flickering torchlight cast long shadows, dancing like specters across the faces of the court. At the center of it all stood Ned Stark, Lord of Winterfell, his gray eyes unyielding, his broad shoulders squared beneath the weight of chains. The accusation of treason hung over him like a noose, tightened by the venomous words of Queen Cersei and her son, King Joffrey, who sat upon the Iron Throne with a cruel smirk curling his lips. Ned Stark had come to King's Landing to serve as Hand of the King, to uphold justice and honor in the name of his friend, Robert Baratheon. But Robert was dead, and the truth Ned had uncovered, that Joffrey was no true heir, born of incest between Cersei and her brother Jaime, had led him here to this moment of reckoning. The court had expected him to confess, to bend the knee and accept exile or execution. But Ned Stark was no Southron lord, pliable and craven. He was a man of the North, forged in ice and iron, and he would not go quietly into the night. "I deny these charges," Ned declared, his voice steady, cutting through the murmurs of the court like a blade through silk. "I am no traitor. I served King Robert faithfully, and I serve the realm still. The boy on that throne is no true king." Gasps rippled through the hall. Joffrey's face twisted in fury, his pale hands gripping the arms of the Iron Throne so tightly that the jagged edges drew blood. "You dare!" he spat, his voice shrill. "You dare speak such lies before your king?" Cersei, standing beside the throne, raised a hand to calm her son. Her emerald eyes glittered with calculation. "Lord Stark," she said, her tone honeyed yet laced with menace, "you have confessed to plotting against his grace. There is no need for further defiance. Accept your guilt, and perhaps mercy may yet be shown." Ned's gaze met hers, unflinching. "I have confessed to nothing but the truth. Joffrey Baratheon is no son of Robert. The throne belongs to Stannis, Robert's true heir. If you would name me traitor for speaking this, then prove it in the sight of gods and men." The hall fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. Petyr Baelish, standing among the courtiers, tilted his head, a faint smile playing at his lips as he sensed the shift in the game. Varys the Spider watched with unreadable eyes, his hands folded within his silken sleeves. Even Ser Barristan Selmy, standing rigid in his white cloak, seemed to hold his breath. Joffrey leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You'll die for this, Stark! I'll have your head on a spike by nightfall!" But Ned raised his voice, clear and commanding. "I demand a trial by combat." The words struck like thunder. A trial by combat, a sacred rite, ancient and binding, where the gods themselves were said to judge the truth through that clash of steel. To deny such a demand was to defy tradition, to risk the wrath of both the Seven and the old gods of the North. The court erupted in whispers, lords and ladies exchanging glances, some shocked, others intrigued. Cersei's composure faltered for a moment, her lips tightening. She had anticipated a swift execution, a public spectacle to cement Joffrey's authority. A trial by combat was unpredictable, dangerous, but she could not refuse without undermining the legitimacy of her son's rule. She turned to Joffrey, who looked to her for guidance, his anger warring with uncertainty. "Your Grace," Ned continued, addressing Joffrey directly, "if I am a traitor, let the gods prove it. Name your champion, and I will face him with my own sword. Let the truth be decided in blood." Joffrey's eyes darted to his mother, then to the crowd, sensing their anticipation. He wanted blood, yes, but he also craved the adoration of the court. A trial by combat would be a grand display, a chance to humiliate the Stark Lord before his death. "Very well," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You'll have your trial, Lord Stark. And when my champion cuts you down, no one will question my right to rule." Cersei stepped forward, her voice smooth as she sought to regain control. The crown named Ser Jaime Lannister as its champion, Let him defend his grace's honor." A murmur of approval swept through the hall. Jaime Lannister, the Kingslayer, was a warrior of unmatched skill, his golden armor and deadly blade the stuff of a legend. Few could hope to stand against him and live. Ned's face remained impassive, but his mind raced. Jaime was in the Riverlands, far from King's Landing, waging war against Robb Stark's forces. It would take days, perhaps weeks, for him to return. Time Ned could use to his advantage. "Sir Jaime is not present," Ned said, his tone measured. "If the crown's champion cannot fight, I name my own now. I choose myself." A ripple of surprise passed through the court. It was rare for a lord of Ned's stature to fight his own trial, but not unheard of. Ned was no stranger to battle, having fought in Robert's Rebellion and the Greyjoy Rebellion. His skill with the sword was respected, though he was no longer a young man, and the weight of his imprisonment had taken its toll. Cersei's eyes narrowed. She had hoped to delay the trial to keep Ned confined until Jaime's return, but Ned's choice forced her hand. "Very well," she said, her voice tight. "The trial will be held in 3 days' time. The crown will name a champion present in King's Landing. Until then, Lord Stark will remain in the Black Cells." As the guards moved to escort Ned away, Sansa's voice broke through the din. "Father!" she cried, her face pale, her auburn hair disheveled. She stood among the courtiers, her eyes brimming with tears. "Please! You can't do this!" Ned turned to her, his expression softening. "Sansa, be strong," he said, his voice low but firm. "The gods will judge truly." He allowed himself a moment to meet her gaze, to convey the love and resolve he felt, before the guards led him from the hall. In the Black Cells, the darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint drip of water and the scurrying of rats. Ned sat against the cold stone wall, his wrists still bound, his body aching from the weeks of confinement, but his mind was sharp, honed by the clarity of purpose. He had demanded a trial by combat not out of desperation, but out of strategy. He knew the Lannisters' game, knew their web of lies and manipulation. A public trial would expose their weakness, force them to act under the scrutiny of the realm, and if he could win, he might yet live to rally the North and protect his family. He thought of Robb, his eldest son, now leading an army against the Lannisters. Of Arya, his fierce little wolf, missing since his arrest. Of Sansa, trapped in this den of vipers, her innocence a shield that could not hold forever. And of Catelyn, his beloved wife, whose strength he drew upon even now. He had to survive for them, for the North, for the truth. The clank of a key in the lock roused him. A torch flared, revealing the slight figure of Varys, the master of whisperers, his silken robes incongruous in the filth of the dungeon. "Lord Stark," Varys said, his voice soft as a sigh, "you have stirred the pot quite thoroughly." Ned regarded him warily. "What do you want, Varys?" "To offer counsel," Varys replied, stepping closer. "You have bought yourself time, but at great risk. The Lannisters will not choose a weak champion. They mean to see you dead." "I know they are kind," Ned said, "but I will not die quietly." Varys tilted his head, studying him. "Your honor is admirable, but it may be your undoing. The court is a battlefield of words and schemes, not swords. If you lose, your daughters remain in Cersei's grasp, and your son's rebellion may falter." Ned's jaw tightened. "Speak plainly, Spider. What do you propose?" Varys's lips curved in a faint smile. "I propose nothing, my lord. I merely observe. But know this, there are those in King's Landing who do not wish to see you fall. Allies, perhaps, if you are wise enough to seek them." "Who?" Ned demanded. Varys spread his hands. "That is for you to discover. Trust is a rare coin in this city. Spend it wisely." With that, he turned and glided from the cell, leaving Ned in darkness once more. In the Red Keep, Cersei paced her chambers, her golden hair gleaming in the candlelight. The trial by combat was a complication she had not foreseen. Jaime was her preferred champion, but his absence forced her to consider alternatives. Sir Meryn Trant was loyal, but unremarkable. Sir Boros Blount was a drunkard, unfit for such a contest. The Hound, Sandor Clegane, was a possibility. His brute strength and ferocity were unmatched, but his loyalty was to Joffrey, not her, and she mistrusted his unpredictability. She summoned Peter Baelish, knowing his cunning could prove useful. Littlefinger arrived with his usual smirk, his green-gray eyes glinting with amusement. "A trial by combat," he said, settling into a chair. "Lord Stark is bolder than I gave him credit for." He's a fool, Cersei snapped, but a dangerous one. I need a champion who can crush him without question. Baelish tapped his chin. The Hound would suffice. He's loyal to your son, and he'd relish the chance to spill Stark blood. But Ned is no green boy. He's fought wars, killed men. The Hound's size may not be enough. Then who? Cersei demanded. There is another, Baelish said, his voice low. Ser Gregor Clegane. Cersei's eyes widened. The mountain that rides was a monster, a giant of a man whose strength was matched only by his cruelty. He was Tywin Lannister's most feared bannerman, currently in the Riverlands with Jaime's host. Gregor is not here, she said. He could be summoned, Baelish replied. A raven to Jaime, and the mountain could arrive within days. Ned Stark would stand no chance. Cersei considered this. Gregor's presence would ensure victory, but it would also draw attention, perhaps too much. The court would question why such a brute was needed to face an aging lord. Still, the thought of Ned's defeat was tempting. Send the raven, she said at last, but keep it quiet. I want no whispers of this until Gregor arrives. Baelish inclined his head. As you wish, your grace. In the north, word of Ned's trial reached Robb Stark's camp at Moat Cailin. The young Lord of Winterfell stood before his bannermen, his direwolf Grey Wind at his side, as a messenger delivered the news. Robb's face was a mask of resolve, but his heart clenched with fear for his father. He's alive, Robb said, his voice steady, and he fights for the truth. We must honor that. The great John Umber slammed a fist on the table. Let's march south, my lord. We'll storm King's Landing and free Lord Eddard. Rose Bolton's cold eyes flickered. A bold plan, but unwise. The Lannisters hold your sisters. A siege risks their lives. Robb nodded, his mind racing. We cannot abandon my father, but we must be strategic. If he wins this trial, he may rally support in the capital. If he loses... He trailed off, unable to voice the thought. Catelyn, standing at his side, placed a hand on his shoulder. Your father is strong, Robb. He's faced worse odds and prevailed. We must trust in him and the gods. Robb met her gaze, drawing strength from her. We'll send word to our allies in the Vale and the Stormlands. If Ned Stark fights, the realm will watch, and if he falls, the North will rise. Back in King's Landing, the city buzzed with anticipation. The trial by combat was the talk of every tavern and market, with small folk and nobles alike speculating on the outcome. Ned Stark, the honorable lord, against the might of the Lannisters. Bets were placed, songs composed, and prayers offered to the Seven Inn and the old gods alike. In the Red Keep, Sansa knelt in the sept, her hands clasped before the altar of the warrior. She prayed for her father's strength, for his safety, for a miracle. Arya, meanwhile, had not been idle. Hidden in the shadows of the city, she had found refuge with a troop of mummers, her identity concealed. She heard whispers of her father's trial and vowed to be there, to see him fight, to find a way to help him. Ned in his cell prepared himself. He exercised as best he could in the confines of his prison, stretching his muscles, sharpening his mind. He thought of ice. His greatsword, likely confiscated by the Lannisters. He would need a blade, a good one, if he was to face the crown's champion. He trusted in his skill, in the righteousness of his cause, but he knew the odds were steep. On the eve of the trial, a visitor came to his cell. Not Varys, but Ser Barristan Selmy. The old knight's face was lined with sorrow, his white cloak stained by the dishonor of serving a false king. Lord Stark, he said, his voice low, I cannot stand by while this farce unfolds. You are an honorable man, and I believe your words about the boy. Ned studied him, wary but hopeful. What are you saying, Ser Barristan? I am saying, Barristan replied, that there are those who would see justice done. Tomorrow, when you fight, know that you do not fight alone. Ned nodded, a spark of hope kindling in his chest. Thank you, sir. As Barristan left, Ned closed his eyes, offering a silent prayer to the old gods. Tomorrow he would face the Lannisters' champion. Tomorrow the gods would judge, and tomorrow the Game of Thrones would shift in ways none could foresee. The morning of the trial dawned cold and gray over King's Landing, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to mirror the tension gripping the city. The Red Keep's outer courtyard had been transformed into an arena, its cobblestones cleared and ringed with wooden stands for the highborn. The small folk crowded beyond, perched on rooftops and leaning from windows. their murmurs a low hum, like the sea before a storm. The trial by combat of Ned Stark was no mere spectacle. It was a clash of honor and power, a moment that could reshape the realm. Ned Stark stood at one end of the makeshift arena, his wrists unbound for the first time in weeks. The black cells had sapped his strength, but his resolve burned brighter than ever. He wore a simple tunic and breeches, the Stark direwolf embroidered on his chest, a reminder of the north he carried into this den of lions. A long sword rested in his hand, not ice. His ancestral greatsword remained in Lannister hands, but a fine blade, its steel honed to a razor's edge. Sir Barristan Selmy had ensured it reached him, a quiet act of defiance against the crown. Across the arena the crowd parted to reveal the crown's champion, Ser Gregor Clegane, the mountain that rides. The giant loomed like a nightmare made flesh, his 8-foot frame clad in blackened plate armor that gleamed dully in the overcast light. His great sword, nearly as long as a man, rested point down in the earth, its hilt gripped in a gauntleted hand the size of a ham. Gregor's helm obscured his face, but his presence alone was enough to send a shiver through the onlookers. Whispers of his brutality, villages burned, innocents slaughtered, had reached even the small folk, and their cheers were tinged with fear. Ned's gray eyes assessed his opponent. Gregor was a force of nature, a man whose strength and savagery had no equal, but Ned had faced giants before, in the form of war and betrayal. He knew speed and precision could counter brute force, if he could endure the mountain's onslaught. His life, his family, and the truth about the Iron Throne depended on it. High in the stands, King Joffrey sat upon a gilded chair, his golden crown glinting despite the dim light. Cersei stood at his side, her face a mask of serene confidence, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. She had summoned Gregor from the Riverlands at great risk, knowing his arrival would draw scrutiny. But the mountain was her guarantee of victory. No man could stand against him, least of all an aging lord weakened by imprisonment. Sansa sat among the courtiers, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her heart pounding. She had prayed ceaselessly for her father, but the sight of Ser Gregor filled her with dread. Beside her, Petyr Baelish leaned close, his voice a silken murmur. "Your father is brave, Lady Sansa, but bravery alone does not win trials. Pray the gods are kind today." Sansa's lips trembled, but she forced herself to nod. "The gods will protect him. They must." In the shadows of the city, Arya watched from a rooftop, her small form hidden among the chimney stacks. She had slipped away from the mummer's troop, her heart set on seeing her father fight. Needle, her slender sword, was tucked beneath her cloak, a comforting against the fear gnawing at her. She didn't understand the politics of the trial, but she knew her father was no traitor. If he fell, she vowed to make the Lannisters pay. The herald's voice rang out, silencing the crowd. In the sight of gods and men, Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell, stands accused of treason against his grace, King Joffrey Baratheon. He has demanded a trial by combat to prove his innocence. The crown names Ser Gregor Clegane as its champion. Let the gods judge the truth. A horn sounded, and the combat began. Gregor moved first, his great sword swinging in a brutal arc that could cleave a horse in two. Ned darted to the side, the blade missing him by inches, its force sending a gust of air across his face. The crowd gasped, and Joffrey leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with bloodlust. Ned kept his stance low, his sword raised, circling to keep Gregor's massive frame in view. The mountain's size was his strength, but it made him slower, less agile. Ned would need to exploit that to wear him down. "You're a dead man, Stark!" Gregor growled, his voice a guttural rumble behind his helm. He swung again, a downward strike that cracked the cobblestones where Ned had stood a moment before. Ned rolled, coming up behind Gregor and slashing at the back of his knee, where the armor was thinner. His blade bit into flesh, drawing a bellow of rage from the mountain. Blood seeped through the gap in the plate, but Gregor barely faltered, turning with terrifying speed to aim a backhanded blow. Ned ducked, the sword whistling over his head, and thrust upward, aiming for Gregor's armpit. The strike glanced off the armor, but it forced Gregor to adjust his grip, giving Ned a moment to retreat. The crowd roared, some cheering for Ned's defiance, others for the mountain's raw power. Sansa clutched her hands so tightly her nails drew blood, whispering prayers under her breath. Cersei watched with icy calm, though her fingers tightened on the arm of her chair. Ned was fighting better than she'd expected, his movements precise despite his weeks in the black cells. But Gregor was relentless, a force that no man could withstand for long. She glanced at Joffrey, whose face was alight with excitement. "He'll be dead soon, Mother," he said, his voice gleeful. "The traitor will pay." In the arena, Ned's breath came in sharp gasps, his muscles burning from the effort of evasion. Gregor's attacks were like avalanches, each swing carrying the weight of death. Ned knew he couldn't match the Mountain's strength, but he could outthink him. He feinted left, then darted right, slashing at Gregor's other leg. The blade found a seam in the armor, drawing more blood. Gregor roared, his great sword sweeping in a wide arc that forced Ned to leap back, stumbling slightly. The Mountain seized the opening, charging forward with a bellow, his sword raised for a killing blow. Ned dropped to one knee, raising his blade to parry. The impact sent a jolt through his arms, nearly wrenching the sword from his hands, but he held firm, redirecting Gregor's momentum to the side. The Mountain staggered, his massive weight carrying him forward, and Ned sprang up, driving his sword into the gap beneath Gregor's helm. The blade pierced flesh, and Gregor howled, blood streaming down his neck. But the wound was not mortal. The Mountain's sheer mass seemed to defy death itself. He tore the sword from Ned's grasp, snapping the blade in two with a twist of his gauntlet. Ned stumbled back weaponless as Gregor advanced, his great sword raised for the final strike. The crowd screamed, Sansa's cry piercing the din. Arya on her rooftop gripped Needle, her heart racing. She wanted to leap down to fight for her father, but she was too far, too small. In the stands, Petyr Baelish's smile widened, sensing the end, while Varys' expression remained unreadable, his eyes flickering to the edges of the arena. But Ned was not done. As Gregor's sword descended, he dove forward, rolling between the Mountain's legs. He seized a fallen shield from the ground, discarded earlier in the fight, and swung it with all his strength, smashing it into Gregor's wounded knee. The Mountain roared, his leg buckling, and Ned scrambled to his feet, grabbing a discarded dagger from the arena floor. Gregor regained his balance, swinging his greatsword in a wild arc. Ned ducked, the blade grazing his shoulder, drawing blood. Pain seared through him, but he ignored it, lunging forward to drive the dagger into the gap at Gregor's elbow. The Mountain bellowed, his arm faltering, and Ned twisted the blade, forcing Gregor to drop his sword. The crowd erupted, the small folk chanting, "Stark! Stark!" as Ned pressed his advantage. He tore the dagger free and aimed for Gregor's neck again, but the Mountain caught him with a backhanded blow, sending him sprawling across the cobblestones. Ned's vision blurred, his ribs aching, but he forced himself to rise, gripping the dagger like a lifeline. Gregor retrieved his greatsword, his movement slower now, blood dripping from multiple wounds. "I'll crush you, Stark," he snarled, advancing. Ned circled, staying light on his feet, his mind racing. He needed an opening, a single moment to end this. The gods were watching, and he would not fail them. In the stands, Cersei's composure cracked. Gregor was wounded, faltering, and Ned Stark was still standing. She leaned toward Joffrey, whispering urgently, "If Gregor falls, we must act swiftly. The crowd cannot turn against us." Joffrey's eyes narrowed. "He won't fall. He's the Mountain." But Cersei was not so certain. She glanced at Ser Meryn Trant stationed nearby and gave a subtle nod. If the trial went awry, she would ensure Ned did not leave the arena alive. Gods be damned! Sansa saw the exchange, her heart sinking. She didn't understand the full meaning, but she knew her father was in greater danger than ever. She turned to Baelish, her voice trembling. "Please, Lord Baelish, help him. You can do something. I know you can." Baelish's eyes softened, but his smile was calculating. "My dear Sansa, I am but a humble lord. What power have I against the crown's champion? But fear not. Your father fights well. Perhaps the gods will favor him." Sansa turned away, her hope dwindling. She didn't trust Baelish, but she had no one else to turn to. Her eyes returned to the arena, where her father faced the Mountain, bloodied but unbowed. Ned knew he was running out of time. His strength was fading, his shoulder throbbing where Gregor's blade had grazed him. The Mountain was wounded, but his rage seemed to fuel him, making him more dangerous. Ned needed to end this now, before his body betrayed him. He feinted left, drawing Gregor's swing, then darted right, leaping onto a low stone barrier at the arena's edge. The height gave him a moment's advantage, and as Gregor lunged, Ned hurled the dagger with all his strength, aiming for the slit in the Mountain's helm. The blade struck true, piercing Gregor's eye, and the giant roared, staggering back, clawing at his face. Ned seized the moment, leaping from the barrier and tackling Gregor's wounded leg. The Mountain crashed to the ground, his armor ringing against the cobblestones. Ned scrambled to top him, wrenching the dagger free and driving it into the gap at Gregor's neck. Again and again. Blood sprayed, hot and coppery, and Gregor's roars turned to gurgles, his massive limbs twitching. The crowd fell silent, stunned. Ned rose panting, his hands slick with blood, the dagger still clutched in his fist. Gregor Clegane lay dead, a mountain felled by a wolf. The herald's voice broke the silence. "The gods have spoken! Eddard Stark is innocent of treason!" The small folk erupted in cheers, their voices shaking the very walls of the Red Keep. Sansa wept, her relief overwhelming, while Arya on her rooftop grinned fiercely, her faith in her father vindicated. In the stand, Cersei's face was a mask of fury, her plans unraveling before her eyes. Joffrey leapt to his feet, his voice shrill. "No, he's a traitor! Kill him!" But the crowd's roar drowned him out, and even the gold cloaks hesitated, wary of defying the god's judgment. Sir Barristan Selmy stepped forward, his white cloak billowing, and raised a hand. "The trial is done. Lord Stark is free." Ned stood in the center of the arena, his chest heaving, his eyes scanning the crowd. He saw Sansa, her face alight with hope, and felt a surge of determination. He had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The Lannisters would not let this stand, and his daughters were still in danger. In the hours that followed, chaos gripped the Red Keep. Ned was escorted to a guarded chamber, not a cell, but his freedom was tenuous. Cersei convened a council in her solar, her voice sharp as she berated her advisors. "This cannot stand," she hissed. "Stark's victory undermines Joffrey's rule. The small folk are calling him a hero." Petyr Baelish steepled his fingers, his tone calm. "The gods have spoken, your grace. To act against Stark now risks rebellion. The North is already in arms, and Stannis Baratheon watches from Dragonstone. You must tread carefully." Varys nodded, his voice soft. "The people love a spectacle, and Lord Stark has given them one. Perhaps a gesture of mercy, release him to the Night's Watch, or exile him to Essos. It would appease the crowd and remove him from the game." Cersei's eyes flashed. "I will not reward treason. Stark must die, but it must be done quietly. An accident, a poison, something untraceable." Baelish smiled. "Such things can be arranged, your grace, but it will cost you." "Name your price!" Cersei snapped. "Power," Baelish replied, his eyes glinting. "A seat on the small council, perhaps. And Lady Sansa's hand, when the time comes." Cersei's lips tightened, but she nodded. "Done. See to it." Meanwhile, Ned was not idle. In his chamber he met secretly with Ser Barristan, who brought news of the court's unrest. "The Lannisters will not let you live," Barristan said. "They fear your influence, your name. You must leave King's Landing." Ned nodded, his mind racing. "I must find Arya and protect Sansa. Can you help me?" Barristan's jaw tightened. "I am sworn to the King's Guard, but I cannot serve a false king. I will aid you, Lord Stark, as far as I am able. There are others, knights, servants, who share my discontent. We can smuggle you from the city, but it must be soon." Ned clasped the old knight's arm. "Thank you, sir. The North will not forget this." As night fell, Ned prepared for escape. He donned a cloak provided by Barristan, its hood concealing his face. The plan was simple. Slip through the Red Keep's servants' passages, meet a trusted ally at the docks, and board a ship to White Harbor. Sansa would be brought to him later once her safety could be ensured. Arya's whereabouts were unknown, but Ned trusted her cunning. She was a Stark, after all. But the Lannisters were not idle. In the city, Baelish's agents moved, spreading whispers of a plot to free Ned. Gold cloaks patrolled the streets, and Cersei's spies watched the Red Keep's gates. As Ned navigated the labyrinthine passages, he heard footsteps behind him, a patrol, or worse. He quickened his pace, his hand on the dagger at his belt. At the docks, a ship waited, its captain a grizzled Northman loyal to House Stark. But as Ned emerged from the shadows, he saw torchlight, gold cloaks closing in. Barristan appeared at his side, his sword drawn. "Go, my lord. I'll hold them." Ned hesitated, torn between honor and survival. "I cannot leave you to die." "You must," Barristan said, his voice firm. "For your daughters, for the North, go." With a heavy heart, Ned sprinted for the ship, the sounds of clashing steel echoing behind him. He boarded just as the gangplank was raised, the ship pulling away from the dock. As King's Landing receded into the night, Ned stood at the rail, his thoughts on Sansa and Arya, on Robb's war, on the truth he still carried. In the north, word of Ned's victory spread, bolstering Robb's cause. The bannermen rallied, their faith in House Stark renewed. But in King's Landing, Cersei's fury burned brighter than ever. Ned Stark had escaped, but the game was not over. She would hunt him, break him, and ensure the Lannisters' dominance. And in the shadows, Arya watched the city burn with torches, her heart set on vengeance. The trial had changed everything, and the wolves of Winterfell were far from defeated. The Blackwater Bay was a churning expanse of dark waves beneath a moonless sky as the ship Winter's Breath carried Eddard Stark away from King's Landing. The Northman captain, a grizzled man named Torrhen, kept the vessel close to the coast, wary of Lannister patrols or sell-sail ships loyal to the crown. Ned stood at the prow, his cloak pulled tight against the biting wind, his mind a storm of resolve and regret. He had won his trial by combat, felled the mountain, and escaped the Red Keep, but the cost was steep. Sansa remained in Cersei's clutches. Arya was lost in the chaos of the city, and Ser Barristan Selmy had likely sacrificed himself to ensure Ned's flight. The weight of those losses pressed against his chest, heavier than any chain. The ship was bound for White Harbor, where Ned could rally House Manderly and send word to Robb, now leading the North's rebellion against the Lannisters. But the journey was perilous. Cersei would not let his escape go unpunished, and her reach extended far beyond the capital. Ned's victory in the trial had made him a symbol, a beacon of defiance against Joffrey's false rule, but it also painted a target on his back. The realm was fracturing, and Ned Stark was at its heart. Below deck, Torrhen joined him, his weathered face grim. "My lord, we've spotted sails to the south. Could be merchants, could be Lannister dogs. We'll keep our course, but you'd best be ready for a fight." Ned nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of the dagger he'd taken from the arena. "If they come, I'll stand with you. The North does not run." Torrhen's lips twitched in a rare smile. "Aye, my lord, you're a Stark, through and through." As the ship sailed on, Ned's thoughts turned to his daughters. Sansa, with her gentle heart, was a prisoner in a gilded cage, her every move watched by Cersei and her spies. Arya, fierce and unpredictable, was somewhere in King's Landing, perhaps hiding, perhaps fighting. He prayed to the old gods that they would protect her, that her wolf's blood would keep her safe until he could find her. And Robb, his son, barely a man, leading an army against the might of House Lannister. Ned's heart swelled with pride, but also fear. The Game of Thrones was a cruel one, and the North was far from united. In King's Landing, the Red Keep was a hive of fury and scheming. Cersei Lannister stood in her solar, her emerald eyes blazing as she faced her small council. The news of Ned Stark's escape had spread like wildfire, fanning the flames of unrest among the small folk and emboldening whispers of rebellion among the lords. The trial by combat, meant to crush Stark and cement Joffrey's authority, had backfired spectacularly. Now the North was rallying behind Robb Stark, and Stannis Baratheon's claim to the throne gained traction with every passing day. "This is intolerable," Cersei snapped, her voice cutting through the room like a whip. "Stark has made a mockery of us. He must be found, and he must die." Petyr Baelish, seated at the table, twirled a quill between his fingers, his smile as sharp as a blade. "Your Grace, Lord Stark's escape is unfortunate, but it presents opportunities. The small folk see him as a hero, a man favored by the gods. Killing him now risks turning him into a martyr. Better to discredit him, spread tales of his treachery, his cowardice in fleeing." Varys, his hands folded within his silken sleeves, inclined his head. "Lord Baelish speaks wisely. The people's love for Ned Stark is a weapon we cannot ignore, but there is another matter. Lady Sansa. She remains our leverage. If we can sway her, make her denounce her father publicly, it would weaken the Stark cause." Cersei's lips tightened. "Sansa is a child, easily manipulated, but she's stubborn in her loyalty. We must break her gently, or she'll become a liability." Joffrey, slouched in his chair, slammed a fist on the table. "I want Stark's head, and Sansa's if she won't obey. I'm the king, and I won't be mocked." Cersei placed a hand on his shoulder, her tone soothing but firm. "You are the king, my love, and you will have your justice. But we must be clever. Stark is a wolf, and wolves are dangerous when cornered. We'll hunt him, but we'll do it our way." She turned to Sir Meryn Trant, who stood by the door, his face impassive. "Double the gold cloaks patrols. Send word to every port from Dorne to the Vale. Stark cannot hide forever. And find the girl. Arya Stark. She's in the city, I know it. She's the key to breaking Sansa. As the council dispersed, Baelish lingered, his eyes glinting with ambition. He had promised Cersei Ned's death, but he played a deeper game. Ned's escape had shifted the board, and Littlefinger thrived in chaos. He had his own plans for Sansa, for the North, for the Iron Throne itself. In the streets of King's Landing, Arya Stark moved like a shadow. She had abandoned the Mummers' troop, their brightly colored wagons too conspicuous for her needs. Now she blended into the city's underbelly, her hair cropped short, her face smudged with dirt to pass as a boy. Needle was hidden beneath her cloak, a constant reminder of her father's strength and her own resolve. She had watched the trial from the rooftops, seen her father fell the mountain, and her heart had soared. But his escape had left her alone, and the city was a maze of danger. She found refuge in Flea Bottom among the beggars and thieves who asked no questions. A girl named Kat, a wiry pickpocket with a quick laugh, had taken her in, assuming Arya was just another street rat. Kat taught Arya the art of blending in, of listening to the city's pulse. The small folk spoke of Ned Stark in hushed tones, calling him the Wolf of Justice, a man who had defied the Lannisters and lived. Arya listened, her pride warring with her fear. She needed to find her father to help him, but she didn't know where to start. One night, as she crouched in an alley, she overheard a pair of the gold cloaks talking. "The Queen's offering 100 gold dragons for the Stark girl," one said, spitting into the mud. "Little Wolf's slippery, though. Could be anywhere." Arya's heart raced. They were hunting her, and Sansa was still in the Red Keep. She couldn't stay in the city forever. She needed a plan. She remembered Syrio Forel, her dancing master, and his lessons. See with your eyes, hear with your ears. She would watch, listen, and strike when the time was right. For now, she would survive. Aboard Winter's Breath, the sails spotted to the south proved to be Lannister ships, 3 swift galleys bearing the Lion of Casterly Rock. Torrhen cursed, ordering his crew to full speed, but the galleys were faster, their oars cutting through the waves. Ned stood on deck, his dagger in hand, as the crew armed themselves with axes and spears. The Northmen were outnumbered, but their loyalty to House Stark burned fierce. "They'll try to board us," Torrhen said, his voice grim. "We'll make 'em pay for every inch." Ned nodded, his eyes scanning the approaching ships. "If I fall, Torrhen, get word to Robb. Tell him to protect his sisters, to fight for the North." "You'll not fall, my lord," Torrhen replied. "Not while we breathe." The first galley drew alongside, its deck bristling with Lannister men-at-arms. Grappling hooks flew, biting into Winter's Breath's rails, and the battle began. Ned fought with the precision of a seasoned warrior, his dagger flashing as he parried swords and struck at gaps in armor. The Northmen roared their defiance, their axes cleaving through shields and flesh, but the Lannisters were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. Ned cut down a soldier only to face another, a knight in crimson armor, his helm adorned with a lion's crest. "Lord Stark," the knight sneered, raising his sword. "The Queen sends her regards." Ned parried the blow, his dagger no match for the long sword, but quick enough to keep him alive. He ducked and weaved, drawing the knight into a narrow space between crates, where the man's longer blade was less effective. With a swift thrust, Ned drove his dagger into the knight's throat, blood spraying across the deck. But more Lannisters surged forward, and Ned's strength was waning. Torrhen fought at his side, his axe a blur, but a crossbow bolt struck him in the shoulder, and he staggered. Ned caught him, dragging him behind a mast. "Hold on, Torrhen," he said, tearing a strip from his cloak to bind the wound. The captain grinned through the pain. "Keep fighting, my lord. The North remembers." The battle raged on, the deck slick with blood. Ned's dagger was a poor weapon against armored foes, but his resolve was unbreakable. He thought of his family, of the old gods, and fought with a ferocity that belied his years. Just as the Lannisters seemed poised to overwhelm them, a shout rang out from the crow's nest. "Sails! To the north!" Ned risked a glance. A ship approached, its sails bearing the merman of House Manderley. Relief surged through him. White Harbor's fleet had found them. The Manderley ship rammed one of the Lannister galleys, splintering its hull, and Northmen poured onto the deck, turning the tide. The remaining Lannisters faltered, and Ned's crew rallied, driving them back. When the fighting ended, Winter's Breath was battered but afloat, and the Manderley captain, Sir Wylis Manderley, clasped Ned's arm. "Lord Stark, we feared you lost. Lord Wyman sent us to patrol these waters, hoping to find you." Ned's voice was hoarse but steady. You have my thanks, Sir Wyllis. The North owes you a debt. As the ship set course for White Harbor, Ned tended to Torrhen's wound, his mind turning to the next steps. He was free, but the war was far from won. He needed to reach Robb, to rally the North, and to find a way to save his daughters. The trial had been a victory, but it was only the beginning. In the north, Robb Stark's camp at Moat Cailin buzzed with news of his father's escape. The bannermen, from the fiery Great John Umber to the calculating Rose Bolton, gathered in the war tent, their spirits lifted by Ned's triumph over the mountain. Robb stood before them, his direwolf Grey Wind at his side, his young face hardened by the weight of command. "My father lives," Robb declared, his voice carrying the strength of Winterfell. "He's proven his honor before the gods, and now he's free. We must march south, unite our forces, and bring him home." The Greyjohn roared his approval, slamming his fist on the table. "Let's gut the Lannisters and hang their lion banners from the wall." Catelyn, standing at Robb's side, raised a hand for silence. "We must be cautious. The Lannisters hold Sansa, and Arya is missing. If we march too boldly, we risk their lives." Roose Bolton's cold eyes flickered. "Your mother speaks wisdom, my lord. A direct assault on King's Landing is folly. We should consolidate our hold on the Riverlands, draw the Lannisters north, and strike when they're stretched thin." Robb nodded, his mind racing. "We'll send ravens to White Harbor, to the Vale, to Stannis Baratheon. If my father reaches the north, he'll rally our bannermen. Until then, we fight smart. The north will not bend to a false king." As the council dispersed, Catelyn pulled Robb aside, her face etched with worry. "Your father is strong, but he's one man against an empire. We must find Arya, and we must protect Sansa. The Lannisters will use them to hurt us." Robb's jaw tightened. "I know, Mother. I'll do whatever it takes to bring them home." In King's Landing, Sansa sat in her chambers, her hands folded in her lap, her heart a tangle of hope and fear. Her father's victory in the trial had filled her with joy, but his escape had left her more isolated than ever. Cersei's kindness had turned cold, her words laced with threats. Sansa knew she was a pawn in a dangerous game, but she clung to her father's words. Be strong. That evening Cersei summoned her to the Queen's Solar. Sansa entered, her head high, though her knees trembled. Cersei sat by a window, her golden hair catching the candlelight, her smile as sharp as a blade. "Lady Sansa," she said, her voice smooth, "your father has fled, abandoning you to our mercy. A traitor's act, wouldn't you agree?" Sansa's lips parted, but she forced herself to stay calm. "My father is no traitor. The gods proved his innocence." Cersei's smile tightened. "The gods are fickle, child. Your father's escape proves his guilt, but you can redeem your family's honor. Speak out against him, declare him a traitor, and Joffrey may show you mercy." Sansa's heart pounded, but she met Cersei's gaze. "I will not betray my father. He is a good man, and the North knows it." Cersei's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. A gold cloak entered, his face grim. "Your Grace, we've found signs of the younger Stark girl in Flea Bottom. A boy, or so they say, but we're closing in." Cersei's smile returned colder than ever. "Excellent! Find her and bring her to me. Alive." Sansa's blood ran cold. Arya was alive, but in danger. She had to do something, but what? As Cersei dismissed her, Sansa's mind raced. She needed allies, someone to help her protect her sister and her father. But in the Red Keep, trust was a rare and dangerous thing. In White Harbor, Ned arrived to a hero's welcome. Lord Wyman Manderly, stout and loyal, greeted him with open arms. His hall filled with bannermen chanting, "Stark! Stark!" Ned's heart lifted at the sight, but he knew time was short. He sent ravens to Robb, detailing his escape and urging unity. He also sent messages to the Vale, hoping to sway Lysa Arryn and to Stannis Baratheon, whose claim to the throne aligned with Ned's truth. That night in Lord Wyman's Solar, Ned met with the Manderly Lord and his sons. "The North must stand as one," Ned said, his voice firm. "Robb fights in the Riverlands, but the Lannisters will come for us here. We need ships, men, and allies." Wyman nodded, his jowls quivering. "White Harbor's fleet is yours, my lord, and our men will march at your command. But the Vale remains silent, and Stannis is a hard man to sway." Ned's jaw tightened. "I'll write to Stannis myself. He knows the truth about Joffrey. If we can unite our forces, we can end this war." As the meeting ended, A scout arrived breathless. "My lord, Lannister ships have been sighted off the coast. They're blockading the harbor." Ned's heart sank. Cersei's reach was long, and her vengeance swift. He turned to Wyman. "Prepare the fleet. We'll break the blockade and send a message to the Lannisters. The North will not yield." In King's Landing, Arya crouched in an abandoned stable. Her breath shallow as gold cloaks searched the nearby streets. Cat, her pickpocket friend, had warned her of the increased patrols, and Arya knew her time was running out. She needed to escape the city, to find her father or Robb, but the gates were watched and the docks were crawling with Lannister men. As she weighed her options, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a hooded cloak, his face scarred and familiar. It was Yoren, the Night's Watch recruiter who had promised to take her north. "Arya," he rasped, "you're harder to find than a shadow cat. Come with me. I'm taking a caravan to the wall, and you're coming along." Arya hesitated, her hand on needle. My father's out there. I need to find him." Yoren's eyes softened. "Your father's a wanted man, lass. The best way to help him is to stay alive. The wall is safe, and I'll get word to Winterfell. Trust me." Arya's heart ached, but she nodded. She followed Yoren into the night, her resolve hardening. She would survive. She would fight. And one day, she would see her family again. In White Harbor, Ned stood on the docks, watching as Manderley ships prepared to face the Lannister blockade. The North was rising, and he was its heart. But in King's Landing, Cersei's plans tightened around Sansa and Arya, and the Game of Thrones grew ever more deadly. The trial had changed everything, but the true battle was yet to come. The harbor's White Harbor gleamed under a pale dawn, its waters reflecting the steel-gray sky. Ned Stark stood on the docks, his cloak snapping in the wind, as the Manderley fleet prepared to confront the Lannister blockade. The ship's stout galleys bearing the merman sigil were manned by Northmen whose loyalty to House Stark burned as fiercely as their lord's resolve. Ned's trial by combat had ignited a spark across the north, a rallying cry that the Lannisters could not extinguish. But the war was far from won, and Ned's heart was heavy with the knowledge that his daughters remained in peril. Lord Wyman Manderley, his bulk swathed in furs, stood at Ned's side, his eyes scanning the horizon where Lannister sails dotted the sea. "They've got us pinned, my lord," Wyman said, his voice gruff. 10 ships, maybe 12. We have the numbers, but their galleys are swift and their crews are seasoned. This'll be a bloody business." Ned nodded, his gray eyes unyielding. "We break the blockade or the North starves. Cersei means to choke us before Robb can march south. We'll show her the strength of the Winterfell." Sir Wylas Manderley, Wyman's heir, approached, his armor gleaming. "The men are ready, Lord Stark. They fight for you, for the North. Say the word, and we'll sail." Ned clasped Wylas's shoulder. "The word is given, for the North." As the Manderley fleet set sail, Ned boarded the flagship, Merman's Wrath, his dagger at his belt and a borrowed longsword in hand. He was no sailor, but he would fight alongside his men, as he always had. The Lannister ships loomed closer, their crimson banners snapping in the wind, and the sea became a battlefield. In King's Landing, the Red Keep was a cauldron of intrigue and desperation. Cersei Lannister paced her solar, her golden hair disheveled, her composure fraying. Ned Stark's escape had humiliated her, and the small folks' whispers of his divine favor gnawed at her authority. Joffrey's tantrums grew more erratic, his demands for blood, alienating even loyal courtiers. The realm was slipping from her grasp, and she knew it. Petter Baelish stood before her, his smirk infuriatingly calm. "Your Grace, the blockade at White Harbor will slow Stark's momentum, but it won't stop him. The North is rallying, and Stannis Baratheon's fleet grows stronger by the day. We must act decisively." Cersei's eyes flashed. "I want Stark dead, Baelish. You promised me his head." "And you shall have it," Baelish replied, his voice smooth. "But killing him now risks uniting the North and Storm's end against us. Let him bleed in this war. Let his allies falter. Then, when he's weak, we strike." Varys, silent until now, spoke softly. "There is another matter, Your Grace. Lady Sansa. She grows bolder, refusing to denounce her father. If she becomes a symbol, like Ned, we lose the court's loyalty." Cersei's lips tightened. "Then break her. Use the younger girl. Arya, have you found her?" Varys inclined his head. "My little birds sing of a boy in Flea Bottom, seen with a Night's Watch recruiter. It may be her, but she's slippery. I've sent men to intercept the caravan. Cersei nodded, her mind racing. Find her and bring her to me. Sansa will bend or she'll watch her sister suffer. In the Riverlands, Robb Stark's army marched south, bolstered by the news of his father's survival. The young Lord of Winterfell stood in his war tent, his bannermen gathered around a map of Westeros. Grey Wind prowled at his side, sensing his master's resolve. The great John Umber pounded the table, his voice booming. "Ned Stark's alive, lads! Let's march on King's Landing and gut the Lannisters!" Rose Bolton's cold eyes flickered. "A bold plan, my lord, but we must secure the Riverlands first. Tywin Lannister's host is near Harrenhal, and Jaime's men harry our flanks. We cannot overextend." Catelyn, her face etched with worry, spoke quietly. "Robb, your father is fighting for the north, but Sansa and Arya are still in danger. We must find a way to free them." Robb nodded, his jaw tight. "I've sent word to White Harbor, and I'll write to Stannis. If we can unite with my father, we'll have the strength to challenge the Lannisters. Until then, we fight smart, and we protect our own." As the council dispersed, Robb lingered, his thoughts on his sisters. He was the king in the north, but he was also a brother, and the weight of that duty pressed heavily upon him. At White Harbor, the sea battle erupted with the fury of a storm. The Manderley fleet clashed with the Lannister ships, their hulls grinding together as arrows rained and grappling hooks flew. Ned fought on the deck of Merman's Wrath, his long sword a blur as he cut down Lannister sailors. The Northmen roared their defiance, their axes and spears tearing through crimson-clad foes. But the Lannisters were disciplined, their archers picking off Manderley men with deadly precision. Ned parried a thrust from a Lannister knight, driving his sword into the man's chest. Blood sprayed, and he spun to face another foe, his muscles burning from the effort. He was no longer young, and the weeks in the black cells had taken their toll, but his will was iron. He fought for his daughters, for Robb, for the truth about the Iron Throne. Wylus Manderley fought at his side, his mace crushing a Lannister's helm. "We're holding, my lord!" he shouted. "Their left flank's breaking!" Ned nodded, his breath ragged. "Push them back, sink their flagship!" The battle turned as the Manderley ships rammed the Lannister flagship, splintering its hull. Flames erupted, spreading across the enemy deck, and the Northmen cheered as the Lion Banner fell. The remaining Lannister ships faltered, some fleeing, others surrendering. By midday, the blockade was broken, and White Harbor was free. Ned stood on the deck, bloodied but unbowed, as the Manderley men raised their voices in triumph. Wyman Manderley clasped his arm, his face flushed with victory. "You've done it, my lord. The North breathes again." Ned's expression remained grim. "This is but one battle. Cersei will send more. We must prepare, and I must reach Robb." That night, Ned penned letters to Robb and Stannis, urging unity. He also sent a message to the Vale, though he held little hope of Lysa Arryn's aid. As he sealed the ravens, a scout arrived with news. A Night's Watch caravan had been spotted near the neck, rumored to carry Arya Stark. Ned's heart leapt. "Send riders," he ordered. "Find that caravan and bring my daughter to me." In the King's Road, Arya Stark traveled with Yoren's ragtag band of recruits, her identity hidden as Aery, the orphan boy. The caravan was a grim affair, thieves, poachers, and broken men bound for the Wall, but Yoren's gruff protection gave her a measure of safety. Needle remained at her side, a secret she guarded fiercely. She thought of her father constantly, her heart torn between hope and fear. If he was alive, she would find him. If not, she would make the Lannisters pay. One night, as the caravan camped near a stream, hoofbeats echoed in the darkness. Yoren roused the recruits, his voice sharp. "Gold cloaks, or worse, arm yourselves and stay low." Arya gripped Needle, her pulse racing. She hid behind a wagon, peering into the night. A dozen riders emerged, their cloaks crimson, their swords drawn. Their leader, a lean man with a cruel smile, called out, "Yoren, we know you've got the Stark girl. Hand her over and you'll live." Yoren spat. "I've got no girls, just boys for the Wall. Ride on, or you'll taste steel." The fight was swift and brutal. Yoren and his recruits fought bravely, but the Lannister men were better armed, their numbers overwhelming. Arya stayed hidden, her heart pounding, until a soldier grabbed her, wrenching her arm. She stabbed him with Needle, the blade piercing his thigh, and he fell with a scream. She ran, dodging swords and arrows, her small size her only advantage. Yoren found her, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Go, lass, into the woods! Find the river, follow it north!" Arya hesitated, tears stinging her eyes. "I can't leave you." "You must," Yoren rasped. "For your father. Go!" She fled, the sounds of battle fading behind her. Alone in the dark, Arya ran, her breath ragged, her resolve unbroken. She would survive, and she would find her family. In King's Landing, Sansa knelt in the sept, praying for her father and sister. Cersei's pressure had intensified, her threats veiled but clear. Sansa knew she was a hostage, her loyalty to her family a chain around her neck, but her father's victory in the trial had given her strength, and she refused to break. And one evening, Petyr Baelish visited her chambers, his smile disarming. "Lady Sansa, you're in a perilous position. The Queen grows impatient. Let me help you. I can ensure your safety, perhaps even your sister's." Sansa's eyes narrowed. "Why should I trust you, Lord Baelish?" His smile widened. "Because I loved your mother, and I see her in you. Help me, and I'll help your family." Sansa hesitated, sensing the danger in his words, but she nodded, playing the game she was beginning to understand. "What do you want me to do?" "Write to your brother," Baelish said. "Urge him to bend the knee, to spare the North further bloodshed. It will appease the Queen, and it will buy you time." Sansa agreed, but her heart was with her father and Robb. She would play Baelish's game, but she would not betray her family. In White Harbor, Ned received word that the Night's Watch caravan had been attacked, its survivors scattered. Arya was missing, but tracks led north. Ned's heart ached, but he clung to hope. His daughter was a wolf, and wolves endured. He marched south with the Manderley host, joining Robb's army in the Riverlands. Father and son embraced, their reunion a beacon of hope for the North. Robb knelt before Ned, his voice steady. "Father, you're the true lord. Lead us." Ned shook his head. "You're the king in the North, Robb. I'll fight at your side, but the crown is yours." Together they planned their next move, bolstered by Stannis' tentative alliance. The North was united, its strength growing. But in King's Landing, Cersei's schemes tightened, and Sansa walked a razor's edge. Arya, alone in the wild, carried her father's fire, her path uncertain but unbroken. The trial by combat had changed the Game of Thrones, but the war for Westeros was just beginning. Ned Stark, alive and free, was a wolf among lions, and the North would rise.